Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Soul to Soul Connections with Jeni Ji. I'm Jeni Ji Cousins, your host and producer. Now, in order to tune into my show, make sure you subscribe to my podcast and YouTube channel to catch all shows and content that are coming out. The links will be in the description box below. You'll be able to catch it. I'm on many different platforms. Now, also, before I forget, if you feel you have an inspiring story or something you'd really like to share with me, reach out to me and let me know, because you never know when I'm going to reach out to you and say, hey, let's do an interview. So now on today's episode, I am so honored and deeply grateful to have the opportunity to interview Neale Donald Walsch. I absolutely connect with his work in so many ways, and he has touched millions of people worldwide. So I'm just going to read a little bit of a bio, and then I'm going to introduce him into the show here. So now, Neale Donald Walsch has written 40 books on contemporary spirituality and its practical application in everyday life, including his new book, God Talk, Experiences of Humanity's Connections with a Higher Power, a book in the Common Sentience book series. Neale is the best-selling author of the Conversations with God series, which 7 of his 9 books made the New York Times bestseller list. Book 1 remained on that list for over 134 weeks. His titles have been translated into 37 languages and have been read by millions of people around the world. Now, Neale's new book is called God Talk, Experiences of Humanity's Connections with a Higher Power. And thank you, Neale. I am so grateful for sharing some sacred time with you to have a chat with you today about your book and other conversations.
Oh gosh, it's love. What a nice introduction. Thank you. And I feel a little overwhelmed. I'm kind of embarrassed with all those nice things that you said, but I'm glad to be here. And it's an honor to be here on your program as well. So thank you for the chance to share these moments with you. How can I be of service to you today?
I love that. So I just wanted to say now, God Talk is your 40th book. Tell us what makes God Talk special and different from your previous books.
Well, if I was asked one question in the past 30 years more than any other single question, it would be, can I have my own conversation with God? And can everybody have this experience? Of course, the answer is naturally yes. God is not exclusive to any one particular individual or any group of individuals for that matter. But then the next question I get is, how can I do that? And one day, about a year ago or so, I got a call, and it was a publisher. And they said, would you be willing to write a book explaining to people how they could have their own conversations with God? I mean, could you put it in like a few steps, the little formula that they could use to get from here to there? I said, I'd be happy to do that. Thank you for asking me. So I did write that book. It came through me very quickly. I wrote it in about 3.5 weeks. From start to finish, and sent it to them, and they published it. It's now wonderfully available to anyone who wishes to obtain a copy. What makes it different from the other books is that this is not a dialogue book. There is no interaction with the divine in this book, but the book does list ways in which people can have their own experience of connecting with the divine. And I do list a 6-step process that I think could work for a lot of people, and that certainly did work for me. So that's what. And also, by the way, the book contains stories from other people who have had their own interaction with God and feel really clear about it. So because the publisher invited the general public, they put a note on the internet saying, if you feel you've ever had a conversation with God or any kind of intervention from the divine, send us your story. And many, many people sent stories in. They picked out the 7 best and put them in the book as well. So the book is fascinating reading, and it helps us all to understand how ordinary people, not just the Pope or the Archbishop of Canterbury or the chief ulama or the head rabbi, not just people who are leading the world's religions or saints and sages, but ordinary people like you and I can have our own, and are in fact having our own direct connection with the divine on a daily basis. I wonder if I'd add this, Jeni. The book makes the point. The book makes the point that we are all having conversations with God all the time. We're simply calling it something else. Because, if we said, well, God told me this or God said that to me, most people would look at us askance, at least, if they didn't invite us to be submitted to the 6th floor of the local hospital, it's like psychiatric ward, because so in order to not be called crazy or weird, we call our conversations with God something else. Maybe we call it an epiphany or a sudden inspiration or a psychic hit or women's intuition, whatever we can get away with that can help us explain that we did receive information from someplace outside of our own mind. So then people say, but when we describe that to other people, people say, what are you, out of your mind? And we say, well, in fact, that's exactly true. I was out of my mind when I received this information. And sometimes those experiences of conversations with God, Jeni, can be very lengthy. It could be a really long piece of information, enough to write down a whole chapter in a book, or it could be a very quick inspiration. I remember driving down the road one day. It was 2:30 in the morning. I was leaving a party, and I was going home rather late at night. And it was 2:30 or 2:45 in the morning. Nobody was on the road. I came to a stop sign. Of course, I stopped. But as I stepped on the gas to start up again to go through the intersection, I heard a voice simply saying to me, stop. For no apparent reason. But, reflexively, my reflexes went into action, and I slammed on the brake. For no apparent reason. It's 2:45 in the morning. There's nobody on the road, except there was. All of a sudden, I had looked both ways. I didn't see anybody, but there must have been some 19-year-old teenager as he whizzed through the intersection from left to right across my field of vision. And he had to be going 65 or 70 miles an hour, in a 25-mile-an-hour zone. He just zipped through the intersection because when I first looked left, there was nobody there. But that's how fast he was going. If I hadn't obeyed the impulse to stop, I wouldn't be here to talk to you about it. Neither would that teenager either be here. We would have had a terrible accident. But somebody tell me, what made me hear that word, stop? Was that my guardian angel? Was that, the divine? And so I believe that we receive information, all of us, either in the form of one or two words or entire sentences, in some cases, entire streams of thought that could be put into a paragraph if we were to write it down. But all of us are having conversations with God all the time. We're simply calling it something else.
So you feel that God is really listening to like our conversations within, and we can talk with God. How, if I wanted to, let's say for somebody, I mean, I do channel myself, but if somebody wanted to have a conversation with God, what would you suggest they do, or how, or is there a sign?
Well, that's an interesting question, Jeni, and my answer is there is no one size fits all answer to this question. I think it's different for everybody. All of us find ourselves, if we really truly wish to have that ongoing relationship with the divine, we each find our own way there. So I think there are some similarities, but there is no one size fits all answer to your question. But the first step is we have to admit there even is such a thing as God. So the first of my 6 steps is the most important one, because billions of people, by the way, do not believe that there is a higher power. So we have to simply acknowledge, there is this entity that many people call God, Allah, Brahman, Jehovah, whatever word we feel comfortable using, but there is a higher power in the universe. And so if we embrace the notion that such a higher power exists, then we have to go to step number 2, which is to be aware that we are, how would I put this delicately, worthy to be receiving information, that the higher power is not looking at us going, well, I don't know, if you're not a saintly person, or at least the Pope or the Archbishop of Canterbury or somebody who's, but no, I can't talk to you, the likes of you. So the second thing we have to do in our process is to acknowledge that we are worthy of receiving such conversations, receiving such information, and that in fact we are receiving such information, as I said a minute ago, all the time. We're simply calling it something else.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you wrote the experiences and the stories of others with their experiences with how they're connecting with God, and you know, how they see God and the consciousness of it. I mean, especially with others, as you mentioned, that don't believe in that. I mean, I've even interviewed people, atheists, that don't believe in God, and then they have a near-death experience, and it really wakes them up, and then they start to share their story.
Yeah, changes their mind in a hurry,
Yeah.
doesn't it? You know what? You did ask me a question a minute ago. Maybe there is one thing that people could try if they want to see if they could make that connection with the divine. This is a suggestion that I make. Keep a small little notebook next to your bed, on the nightstand next to your bed. And if you'd like to really see, if the process could work, if you have a really important question that you'd like to ask the divine, not a silly question like what are the winning numbers of the next lottery ticket, but I mean a really important question. Write the question down before you go to sleep, but then let it go at that. Write just the question, put the pen down, put the tablet down, let it go until morning. And when you wake up the next morning, the first thing before you do anything, pick up the pen, pick up the tablet, and write down the first thing that comes to your mind. Don't question it. Don't doubt it. Don't write it off to your imagination. Just write down the first thing that comes to your mind, and it might astonish you the clarity of the response that you'll receive to the question you asked the night before.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's getting that clarity within and not second doubting it.
Yep.
You know, some others are like, how do I know if it's true, right? And it's like,
don't second guess.
Yeah.
No second guess. Don't second guess it.
Yes. Yes. So when people are sharing their experiences of God talking to us, do you feel that's really, really important?
No, it's totally unimportant. You should just forget about it completely and never mention it to anybody, because you're making it all up. You're just imagining it. Of course it's important.
Exactly.
Of course it's important, and you want to really pay attention to it, which is,
Yes.
by the way, one of the 6 steps that I mentioned in the book. Don't write it off. Pay attention to it.
Yeah.
Really give it the weight that it deserves, and realize that, I need to pay attention to this.
Yes. Yes, because even one little experience somebody hears, it could wake them up somehow, or make them think even more so and such. Can you share one of your stories in your book? In your book, God Talk?
Well, one of the stories that really struck me was a lady who felt that God spoke to her through her own son. She had, I think it was a 6-year-old or 7-year-old child. And the mother was trying to figure out, an answer to a major question. She was looking at some health issues in any event. But one day, out of the blue, this 7-year-old walked up to her in the kitchen, her 7-year-old son, and said, "Mommy, why don't you call Dr. Schneider," or whatever his name was, and ask him about your back, because I think I've been noticing that your back is really hurting you a lot, or whatever. And she looked at him like, where in the world would you come up with that idea? Where would a 7-year-old even to remember the name of her doctor, much less to walk in there like an adult and suggest that she call him? So she did, in fact, call the doctor, and he said, come in for an appointment. They looked at it, and she had a fairly important medical procedure and she's looking back on it all. She's very clear that if you please, God chose to work through her son in a way that she couldn't deny. When your 7-year-old child makes a suggestion and comes up with the name of your doctor out of the blue, you got to figure out there's something going on here. There's more going on. The statement that I like to make is there's more going on than meets the eye. And I think that's true, Jeni, of all of life. I think with the entire life experience from birth to death, there's more going on here than meets the eye. Or as Bill said, he wrote a wonderful play called Hamlet. And what Bill said in that play, he had one of his characters saying, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. And it's true. There are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in our philosophy. That's true for the largest number of people. So there is more going on here than meets the eye.
Absolutely. Because in God Talk, you did share the 6 steps to talk with God. And under step 3, you defined it as willingness. What does this mean? And what can people do to be willing?
They have to be willing to be willing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, to give a simple answer to a very direct question, I think they have to be willing, and that is they have to allow themselves to step into willingness. They really do have to be willing, rather as opposed to being reluctant or hesitant or worried about it. Some people are actually worried about imagining they could have a conversation with God because maybe their religion teaches them that you can talk to God. We can all pray to God, but God will not talk back to you. And if you're going to ever say out loud to anybody that God speaks directly to you, then we have no choice but to accuse you of blasphemy or heresy or apostasy, some kind of ecclesiastical offense that we don't appreciate. So there are some people who are actually worried about even thinking that God would speak directly to them. So that's what comes under the category, under the label of willingness, to be willing to set aside all of your reluctance, to be willing to set aside all of your doubts, to be willing to set aside any worry that you might have, any anxiety that might be attached to the thought that God's talking to me, just to be willing, to embrace the experience exactly as you're having it.
Yeah. And not to second guess it. I mean, especially in today's society with so much going on in the world, I believe if we're tuning in and paying more attention, we're getting so many more messages from God and the spirits and angels and such like that, if we're open to it. And it can really change a life, like transform others.
Yes, and what's important is to understand how God speaks to us, because if we're expecting all of God's communications to come to us in the form of complete sentences or paragraphs of information, that's one way that it could happen. But also sometimes God speaks to us just simply through a feeling.
Yeah. Just knowing.
Yeah, a feeling that comes over us that may not even have any particular words associated with it. It's just a certain feeling about something. Feelings, I'm told, are the language of the soul. So God will speak to us in feelings or the chance utterance of a friend. We just happen to, by the way, by non-coincidence, we just happen to run into somebody on the street that we haven't seen in 5 years. Oh, it's good to see you again. How are you? Yeah. And this friend utters something that comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And just happens to be, speaking directly to us. Another good example, and this is a vivid one from my own life. I remember I had a big question in my mind. Doesn't really matter what the question was, but I can tell you what was interesting. I was in the hairstyling salon to get my hair done, to get a haircut, and there is an old magazine in the waiting room that had to be 3 or 4 months old. But the cover story on the magazine from 4 months ago was directly associated with the question I had in my mind.
Wow. Yeah.
And I went, that's not possible. That's just not possible. What are the odds of that? What are the odds of me even coming into this particular hairdressing place and that particular magazine sitting there at that time, a 4-month-old magazine? Of course, I picked it up. I read the thing, and I did a very unkind thing. I actually tore the article out of the magazine, folded it up, and stole it and put it in my pocket because I didn't want to forget it.
Yeah.
So, thank goodness it was a 4-month-old magazine. But as I got home, I thought, wow, if this isn't coming to me from a higher source, what are the odds of that?
Yeah.
And sometimes it could even be the words on the billboard on the next corner you make
Yes.
you're driving along the highway, and there's the word on the billboard, a sentence,
Yeah.
a 7-word sentence that answers your direct question.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of those non-coincidences.
Yes. Yes.
So,
I mean, even before I went to spread my dad's ashes, I asked, Daddy, you going to be with me? And there's a parking lot, and it was all darker cars. And there was one car, it was orange. The license plate said Dad.
oh my gosh.
And it,
Did
and
that
I'm
blow you
also,
away or what?
well, no, I'm used to that kind of stuff, right? But I always ask. I like to get those confirmations as well. And
Oh,
the most interesting thing as well is the car was orange, and I'm looking at having to buy another vehicle, and the vehicle I'm actually looking at is Monarch Orange.
my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it was just, I tell people to do that, pay attention to the signs and such
Yeah.
like that. Especially in
Yeah.
work at the hospice, I'd see feathers and such like that on the floor. I'd pick up. And
I used to work for a lady named Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she was a psychiatrist who wrote many books on death and dying. And I was a staff person for her for a while. She used to say there are no coincidences in the universe. She calls it divine intervention.
yeah, yes, that's exactly perfect word, perfect
I mean,
word.
come on, you're asking Dad after he passes on, are you going to be with me? Tell me, you find a way to tell me you're with me. You pull into a parking lot late at night, it's dark as anything, and there's a
Yes.
car with a license plate DAD on it. Come on.
And the car is orange, like the same car, like the same orange I was looking at buying this other car. Like seriously, this was just recently.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I know. I love it. I love it. I just surrender it and go with the flow. Okay, give me a sign for this or that, and I surrender it. I don't go looking for it, and then something appears, and I'm like, okay. And then just to tell you something else, and then I was walking my dog early in the morning, and I'm like, Dad, should I get this car, like this orange car? This man comes out of his house with a bright orange jacket on. I mean, how many people do you see wearing a bright orange jacket?
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
I hear you. I
Yeah.
hear you.
Yeah.
He,
So
he might as well have had a sign on the back of his jacket that said yes.
yeah, exactly. Yes, man. Yes, man.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
So now
Amazing.
God Talk is part of a common sentience, a mystical book series. Tell us why you decided to write a book for this series.
Well, I didn't. I have to say, every other book I've written 39 other books. I wrote on my own initiative. I just, I had an idea. I wrote a book, and then I, sent it to some publishers, and I found a publisher, and they were willing to put the book out. But I didn't really decide to write this book in the way people think. As I mentioned a little while ago, my phone rang out of the blue. It's the first time it ever happened to me that a publisher actually called me and said, would you write this book? As I mentioned a while ago.
Yeah.
And so, and of course I said yes when they asked me, would you be willing to write a book about how you had your own and how people can have their own conversations with God? So what made me decide yes was an invitation that direct from a publisher was most unusual in my life, because that's not normally how the relationship develops between a publisher and an author. Usually the author comes to a series of publishers and says, I've written a book. Would you have any interest in publishing it? But here was a publisher calling me. So of course I said yes, I'd be very happy to. And I was happy to do it. And I'm very happy with the result. They did a wonderful job with it.
Yeah. And they're amazing. Like they're phenomenal books, phenomenal. I've followed your work for many years. So how can we bring peace, prosperity, and security to the world?
By changing our definition of God.
Mm.
Because the current definition that we're using of God is what stops the world from experiencing peace and prosperity and happiness. We imagine, that is, most people who believe there is, and what's interesting, Jeni, the statistics have shown, surveys have been taken by anthropologists over the past 10 years in most of the nation's countries, asking a single question, a one-question survey: do you believe in a higher power? And statistically speaking, 8.5, 85% of the answers were yes, people believe in a higher power. But here's what's interesting. While 85% of human beings say, yes, I believe there's some kind of a higher power, we can't come to an agreement about what that higher power is, what it wants, how it works, how it reacts, if we don't give it what it demands. If it in fact demands anything, we just can't come to an agreement about that. But most people who believe in God do agree on the following. Most people believe, not all, but most people who ascribe to a particular religion believe that God is loving, for sure, but also judging, condemning, and punishing. Now, here's what's dangerous about that. If we really believe that our God, our deity, is judging, condemning, and punishing, that is, if we don't do what he demands, or what he commands, or what he wants, and do it in the way, by the way, not just what he wants, but in the way he wants it. That is, you have to belong to a particular religion. Jeni, as a child, I was taught. I was born and raised, I don't want to be disparaging, but I was born and raised in the Roman Catholic religion. And my Catholic religion taught me, I was taught by the nuns in school, that if you are not Catholic, or at the very least Christian, if you don't belong to the Christian faith, you're going to hell. I mean, it didn't matter whether you were kind, generous, compassionate, forgiving, caring, patient, understanding, loving person. None of that mattered. You belong to the wrong religion, you're going to hell. And this was the God I was taught to believe in. Now, even at the age of 9, my mind is trying to get itself wrapped around the notion of a higher power who would send a poor person who might be, in some other country, who simply doesn't embrace a particular religion. Maybe they're Muslim or Jewish or Hindu or who knows what, but they're not the right religion, and God's going to send them to hell. And I just couldn't, at the age of 9, I couldn't grasp that notion. But here's what's sad. I want to make a point here, Jeni, and that the point I'm making is most people believe in a God who is judgmental, condemning, and punishing. Therefore, we think it's okay for us to be judgmental, condemning, and punishing with each other, because our religions teach us to be godlike, to imitate the behaviors of the divine. So if we think the divine behaves in that way, we will consider it okay for us to behave in exactly the same way. And that's the answer to your question. How can we bring peace and joy and happiness and love, more love to the world? By believing in a God, by changing our definition of God, and using, I wrote a book called The God Solution. And in that book, I answered the question, if there really is a God, if there really is a divine power, a higher power, then why is the world such a mess? And why has the world been such a mess from the beginning for thousands and thousands of years? Why doesn't God step in and just do something about it? And the answer that I received when I asked God the same question is, oh, sweetheart, Neale, sweetie, it wasn't my intention to create a species of minions that all human beings would simply be subjects in the kingdom. Do as I say, and you'll get the goodies. Don't do as I say, and you're in big trouble. Like I'm some kind of a, master over the race. That wasn't my intention to, my intention was simply to invest in you, to give each of you, every single sentient being in the universe, the power to produce your own reality. And so if you don't like the way things are going on Earth, then notice who's creating them that way. Just change your mind about how you want things to be created. But how can we change our mind about how we want to interact with each other when we imagine that God interacts with us with judgment, condemnation, and eternal punishment for the slightest offense? Like missing Mass on Sunday. The Catholic Church also teaches that if you miss Mass on Sunday, I don't mean regularly, I don't mean for a year, I mean one Sunday in your life. If you miss Mass, if you think I'm exaggerating, ask a priest. This is a mortal sin. Missing Mass without a good excuse. If you're taking care of a sick parent, fair enough. Or if you have to work on Sunday morning, okay. But if you just go to play golf, because you have some out-of-town friends, and one particular week, 1 week out of your life, you decide not to go to Mass. If you die the next day in a car accident, God forbid, you're going straight to hell. Burning in the fires of hell for missing church one Sunday of your life.
Yeah.
Now, this is why we behave this way with each other. It sounds like I'm exaggerating the point, but we are behaving with each other the way we have been told that God behaves with us.
Yeah.
We have been told that it is appropriate for us to behave with judgment and condemnation of each other. Now, here's the suggestion that I make in the book called The God Solution. What if we came up with a new definition of God? What if we decided that God could be defined in 2 words? Pure love.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, Jeni, when I say this in front of an audience, somebody in the back of the room is bound to get up and say, "Oh,
Yeah.
Mr. Walsch, please, please, please.
Yeah.
We've been listening to you for 20 minutes for you to tell us that you think that God is love." Everybody agrees on that. Even religions that have dogmatic,
Yeah.
difference of opinion, we all agree that God is love. And that's when I have to say to my friend in the back of the room, whoa, 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 relax. I didn't say that. I didn't say God is love. I said God is pure love.
Yeah.
Now my friend in the back of the room will say, "Okay, what's the difference?"
Yeah.
The difference is that pure love needs, expects, requires, and demands nothing in return. Read that, Nothing. God doesn't require us to worship him, to obey him, to even believe in him. God requires nothing of us in order for us to be worthy of receiving God's blessings and God's love. That's what pure love is. Pure love requires and demands and expects and even hopes for nothing in return. Jeni, we can't even love the person on the pillow next to us that way.
Yeah.
So we think that God is a trade deal. God is involved in a trade deal with us. Like nations have trade deals. I'll give you this, you give me that. God says, you give me worship, you give me obedience, you believe in me, and I'll give you all the goodies. But if you don't believe in me in the right way, or if you don't worship me every single Sunday of your life, or maybe it's Saturday in your religion, or maybe it's Friday night, whatever, but you got to be with me once a week, or you're in big trouble. So this is the idea. The God solution is to imagine, what if we decided that God was pure love? And what if we chose to see if we could embrace that notion and demonstrate pure love, even with the person on the pillow next to us? Can we get through a single day without needing, requiring, demanding, or expecting anything from that person in return for our love? Because love is not a transactional experience. It's not a transaction. I'll give you this if you give me that. It's not a quid pro quo relationship. It's I love you because of who you are. And I need nothing in return from you. in order for me to give you my love. Jeni, it took me, I'm sorry to say, 40 years to learn that. I went through relationship after relationship after relationship, thinking that it was a transaction.
Yeah.
I'll give you this, you give me that.
Yeah.
Only when I finally married the lady I've been married to now for 16 years, which is for me a record, but only when I finally found this particular person and I decided, you know what, I'm going to love this person because of the extraordinary human being that she is, having nothing to do with what I can get from her.
Unconditional, unconditional. You know, as I see it, it's the most powerful energy in the world. Most powerful energy in the world. I mean, even with my work that I do, all my spiritual work, it's from my heart, and it's from my soul, and it's unconditional, you know, and it's my goal to even if it's one person, let's say one person a day, you know, it doesn't matter if there's 100 or whatever, as long as I've touched that person's soul and opened their heart to make them believe, that person can really change other people and share love upon the world. I mean, even when I do prayers every day as well, and meditate and chant every day. You know, I always radiate and chant out unconditional love, especially more to, you know, people who are of like the dark forces and negativity, and we're really struggling, like the so-called leaders. We won't even talk about that. Don't even get me started. But, you know, for them, because if they were really in tuned with unconditional love, all of this would not be going on or happening.
No, of course not.
Right?
Now I have a question to ask you. Does a person who does not accept Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior go to hell?
No.
Oh, they can go to heaven too?
Yeah, of course. I mean, in my way of perception, we all go. We all have God to answer to for.
What do you mean? What do you mean God to answer to? You mean what if God, when you say God to answer to, does that mean there's a judgment and God says you didn't believe in the right way, so you're going to hell?
No. I believe
Okay.
that when we go, we're all surrounded by unconditional love.
So what do you mean? What do you mean God to answer to? What do you mean by that?
Well, it's like for me, I mean I do readings and such like that, and had many near-death experiences, and you know, I personally believe that when we pass on, we're welcome. Doesn't matter who we are, what we've done, we're all welcomed in by love. We're all showing you know,
there's
what
no
we've
God.
done.
So there's no God to answer to in the sense of.
Well, yeah, they're not going to stand there and point their finger and all of these things. I believe we're all shown upon our journey, the good and the bad, or whatever our journey was on earth.
And given a chance to do it differently the next time.
Yeah. Reincarnation, coming back.
Yeah, and if we don't like what we did, if we go back to the other side, if we find ourselves in the spiritual realm, we say, oh, wow, I don't think I would want to do it that way again the next time. And we come back, you know, with another incarnation in a different body, at a different time, in a different place. And perhaps we respond differently because we've grown in our spiritual understanding of who we are and why we're here. So you and I share the same belief. So there really is no God to answer to in the sense of, oh, I better get the answers right or I'm going to be in trouble. Yeah. There's no way. I'm going to write a book one day called There's No Way to Be in Trouble with God.
Yeah, perfect. I'd love it. I love it. That's a great title. And I would do that because, you know, even, you know, whenever I'm talking to people every day and such, even with my clients and so on, you know, I get asked that question a few times, actually. Well, there is no God because of this and this and that and all of that. Exactly. And I understand it. And that's why with me, you know, let's say if I talk to 100 people today, for instance, right? Even if I can, you know, take one person, open up their heart, open up their soul to see life, to experience unconditional love, because for me, the number one law of the universe is do not ever judge anyone, no matter what has happened or they're going through. We all have our own journey and our life lessons to walk upon and experience, you
So
know,
in other
because,
words,
yeah,
in other words, he meant it when he said, judge not and neither condemn.
yes, yes, absolutely. And that's why, you know, even, you know, the podcast here, I call it Soul to Soul Connections with Jeni Ji, because it's soul to soul. We're connecting and talking soul to soul, heart to heart, you know, and authenticity and speaking. It's so important. I'm very drawn to authenticity, blah, blah.
Well,
Authentic people and
I
such
hope
like
that
that
you're
by
right
the
about
heart.
it. I hope that you're right about everything you're saying, because if you're not right, you're going straight to hell.
Yeah. Well, actually, I've got 7 books I started writing many years ago. They're sitting in my folders.
But you know,
So
it's as George Bernard Shaw said one day, even if you are going to hell, all the interesting people are there anyway.
exactly, you can have a party and connect with them like, hey. Absolutely, absolutely. So now, out of all of your books, out of all 40 books now that you've written, do you have, I mean, of course, they all have their own energy and everything in it, but do you have, out of all of these books now, like one of your favorite, like one that you're like, I like this book more for whatever reasons, right?
Yes, I'm not sure I'd call it my favorite book, but I think it's the most important. It's the book Home with God.
Mm,
The subtitle is In a Life That Never Ends. And
mhm,
it's a book about the afterlife. It's a book about what happens. It was a dialogue book. I'm questioning God. It's a back and forth conversation with God.
mhm.
But I'm asking God in the conversation, you know, really, what is death? What's the deal here? Give me what is death? And what happens after we die? And the book answers that question in specific detail. So it contains some wonderful, wonderful insights, including the statement that nobody dies at a time or in a way that is not of their choosing. And as well, of course, there is no such place as hell, that every soul that ever was, is now, and ever will be, always returns to the realm of the spiritual. There's no such place as hell or Hades or whatever you want to call it. Such a place simply does not exist. And many other revelations in the book as well about life after death. What is death? God said it's simply a change of address.
Yeah,
It just
absolutely.
you continue to exist. Death does not exist. You continue to exist. You simply no longer exist inside of your present physical form, but you leave that form in a sense behind, and then you return. But one of the interesting things that I was told in Home with God is that we don't even leave our form behind completely in the way people think we do, that we simply re-energize what we call our body and our mind. But portions of your body and your mind go with you. And when you reincarnate, you will reincarnate using some portions of your body and your mind, including some portions of your mind that you've had in what you call previous lifetimes,
Yeah.
which explains deja vu.
Yeah.
That explains how we can sometimes walk down the street and have a deja vu experience. And we wonder, how can we know that? I remember being in Hamburg once with my wife, and I was there to give a lecture. But we're walking down the street in Hamburg, and I said, oh my gosh, if we make a left turn at the next corner, there's a beautiful, beautiful building there with pillars, huge pillars, 3-story high pillars, and it's a gorgeous, some kind of a government building. We got to go look at it. It's really great architecture. And my wife said, how do you know? I said, I don't know. I just feel like it. So we turned the corner, and sure enough, 4 blocks down, there was the building.
Mm.
And she said, that's impossible. You almost described it. I said, you know what? I've been here before.
Yeah.
This is not my first time.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes we have that experience, which the French call déjà vu, I've seen this before. And we might also have the experience just meeting a person. For instance, when I did meet the lady who is now my wife and has been for 16 wonderful years, I remember when she first walked into my presence, my first thought was, oh boy, here we go again. We've done this before. And later on, not immediately, of course, but as we got to be friends and got to know each other, I said to her, it feels like I've known you all my life. It feels like, I don't know, I don't know how to explain it. I know this sounds like a come on. It sounds like a line, but I really do feel like I've known you forever. And she looked at me, she said, my God, I was afraid to say it, but I feel the same way about you. I feel the same way about you. We got married a week later.
Wow.
Yeah, we were driving down the road in the car. We were going to go see a play. We were going to the theater. It was our first date, our first real date, dinner and a theater. And on the way to the theater, she turned to me in the car and she said, I think we should be married. And I looked at her and I said, you don't want to say that to me twice.
Yeah. Wow.
She said, no, I'm serious.
Yeah.
I think we should be married.
Yeah.
We like the same food. I just discovered that at the restaurant. We like the same music. We like the same play. We have the same taste in everything, and obviously I love your books and, we're good together physically. We discovered that the other night. So why wouldn't we be married?
Yeah.
And so we got on a plane 2 days later and flew to Las Vegas, where there's no waiting period to get a marriage license. We got a marriage license in an hour, went to a marriage chapel, and became husband and wife.
Wow.
Just as simple as that.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I believe in that. There was an actor, Andy Garcia, I think it was, and he was at the airport. He was like on one of his films or whatever, and he was at the airport having a drink, and he met the lady beside him, and he married her that night, like literally, and they've been together for many, many years. I mean, it's that, like, I do past life akashic record readings as well, and people are like, how do you know? And I'm like, because whenever you meet someone and you feel as if you know them somehow, yet you're like, this is the first time we physically have met, and feel really comfortable with them, really circle that, because that's a clear indication that you have had other lifetimes or a lifetime with that person. And they're that soul connection. We all have different reasons why we meet different people for releasing karmic situations and such. But I love that story.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful.
Yes, and my life has been that way because I've been really certain. I listen to the feelings and the words and the ideas and the thoughts and the emotions that God sends to me and sends through me.
You can sense that, feel that.
Yep. I've learned to trust it.
Yeah.
My life has taught me to trust it. I didn't trust it the first 20 years, but boy, of my adult life. But when I got into my 40s and 50s, especially after my 50th birthday, I started paying attention and listening carefully to what I was hearing.
Yeah. And how you're feeling too. I get that. And sometimes I tell somebody, see how your body feels when you're interacting with someone. And, if there's that calmness with it, then the intentions are good. If you're like, I don't know, all of this stuff, that person's intentions might not be, for the right reasons and such like that.
Yep. Give it what I call the tummy test. I had a lady in one of my workshops. She couldn't decide whether to take a job or not, that she was really offered a good job, but she didn't know whether to take the job or not because it would require her to leave the job she currently had. She said, what can I do? What can I do? And I said, do you have a coin in your pocket or in your handbag? She said, yeah, I said, okay, take the coin out. She took the coin out. I said, now I want you to flip the coin. Heads, it's yes, take the job. Tails, it's no, don't take the job. She said,
Wow.
really? A flip of a coin? I said, well, that's not just a flip of a coin. When you flip the coin and then you look at whether it was heads or tails, listen to what your body says. Because if it's heads, then your body will either go, oh no, I didn't want to do it. Or your body will go, yippee. See,
Yeah.
it's what I call the tummy test. Your tummy will never lie to you.
Wow.
Listen to your tummy. So she took the coin out, she flipped it.
Yeah.
It came up tails, and her tummy went, oh no, I really want it. And I said, there's your answer.
Wow. That's really, really great advice. Like, I'm gonna try that. Like, seriously, whatever. It's like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do?
Yeah,
Right?
the tummy
That's
test.
really good advice. So now
Yeah.
your conversations with God, now that came out as a movie back in 2006,
Yes.
right? How is that? Like, how did that go for you?
It's the most surreal experience. I don't know how many people have had the opportunity to go to a theater and see on a 45-foot screen, on a CinemaScope screen in front of you, your own life.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very surrealistic moment. I'm sitting in the back of the theater. I didn't even want anyone to know I was there. So I snuck in, I snuck into the back of the theater. My wife and I were watching this movie of my life, made by Stephen Simon, who produced and directed many Hollywood films, What Dreams May Come, and Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. He's a well-known Hollywood director and producer. And he read my book and said, I want to make a movie of this. So he did make a movie of it, starring Henry Czerny. And I went to watch the film in the theater. Very strange experience. But they did a wonderful job because, of course, he consulted with me. He came to my house. Stephen Simon did, the producer and the director. He came to my house with a screenwriter, and they sat down with me for 3 days and went through my life from beginning to end, so they could really get an accurate script put together. And he gave me something that most Hollywood producers would never do. Stephen Simon gave me script approval. He said, if there's anything in the script you don't like, we'll take it out of the movie. We will not put it, it will not be in the film. So they gave me script approval. And when I agreed with the script, because they didn't really put anything in there that I didn't like, and nothing that was not true. So then they produced a film, which was basically the story of my life from the time I had my conversation with God experience. Very well done. I thought the movie was well done. The movie is called, predictably, Conversations with God, the movie.
And I love how he gave you that, make sure that everything is okay on your script and such like that, because sometimes things are reworded and such, everything.
Oh yeah,
So
he allowed me
yeah,
to come. I was actually on the set when the movie was being made.
mhm,
They
yeah,
made the movie. They made the movie in the city in which I lived. They came to the city where I had the experience of being on the street, because I was living on the sidewalk for a year. So they depicted that whole experience of me being homeless and on the sidewalk, and then me crying out to God in the middle of the night one night, what does it take to make life work? What have I done to deserve a life of such continuing struggle? And I screamed out to God, tell me the rules. I'll play this damn game. Just tell me the rules.
yeah.
And after you give me the rules, don't change them, because it seems like the rules of life are changing every other day. So, and that's when God began speaking to me and said, take this down.
Yeah.
So I began taking down on a yellow legal pad everything that I was hearing, which brought up other questions, other answers, other questions. So Stephen Simon read that book and he said, I got to make a movie of this. And he came to the city in which I live with his whole crew and the stars of the film and made the movie.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. I love that, because those stories are very inspirational, especially nowadays with so many ways and what's happened with the world and such like that. So if somebody came to you and they're like, you know what, Neale, I've lost faith in life. I've had so many disappointments. I'm giving up and I don't know what else to do. Well, what would you tell them?
You can do that if you want, but you'll simply come back and do it all over again anyway. So you might as well use this particular lifetime
Yeah.
But I would say to them, let's make the first important decision. Number one, who are you? I would ask them to answer the question, who are you? And if they say, well, I don't know, I'm a guy. I guess I'm, a fireman. I work for the fire department. I'm a father. I said, no. I didn't ask you what you do. Who are you? Do you think you are this, a body? Or this? Do you think you're your mind? Or is this who you think you are? Another life form, not much different from a bird in the sky or a fish in the sea, more sophisticated perhaps, fair enough, but just another form of life.
Yeah.
Or do you think you're more than that? Do you think it's possible, just possible, that you're actually a spiritual entity, having a body and having a mind, using simply your body and your mind as tools with which to complete the agenda of your soul?
Yeah.
So who are you? And if they say, well, I hadn't really thought about it in those terms, I would say, think about it in those terms, because here's what I've come to tell you. Or really, here's what you've come to me to hear. If you, by the way, I say to the person, if you came to me with that statement, and you think it was by coincidence, think again. You came to me because you knew I would have the answer. And the answer is that you are a spiritual entity, not simply another form of life in physicality. You are a spiritual entity, and you've come here for an entirely different reason, having nothing to do with what you're doing, how much money you make, how your life is going in terms of the good luck or the bad luck. That had nothing to do with any of it. You are here to complete the agenda of your soul, which is to announce and declare, to express and fulfill, to become and to demonstrate your true identity as an individuation of divinity. And if you decide that from this day forward, everything that you think, say, and do will be a demonstration of your divinity, your experience of your life will change overnight. The exterior events may not be different, but your interior experience will be dramatically different.
Any final words about God? Like any final words from you or from God?
God says, Neale, your life is not about you. Tell everyone else as well. Your life is not about you. It's about everyone whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it.
Yeah.
And when you understand that, all the mystery goes away.
Yeah. That's the power of love.
I could, of course, be wrong about all of that. But I don't think so.
Yeah. Yeah. The power of love. I've always believed in that, the power of love. So, I mean, it's been such a pleasure and like a big honor for me to chat with you today. And I know you're very busy and such. When does your book officially get released? Just so others out there who
Well, it's available right now. It can be pre-ordered now.
Yes,
it can be pre-ordered at Amazon or any online bookstore, and I think it's physically available on the 14th of November.
Okay, yeah, because I'm going to have people say, "When's this book out?" So that's why I'm like, okay, I'll ask. Right. So, I mean, I could chat with you for hours, like hours and hours and hours. And I mean, I'd love to have you come back again and chat with you again. I mean, I know you're very busy and such like that.
We can do that. It's very simply done. Anyone who would not accept an invitation to spend more time with you has got to be out of their mind.
Oh, you're so sweet. You're so very kind. Very kind. Such a very sweet person. Very sweet person. And I just love your work. I adore your work so much. And, I want to thank you again for taking time to spend sacred space with me, as I call it, one-on-one, soul to soul, heart to heart, keeping it real, talking about, God. My heart's filled with much gratitude for this opportunity as well.
Thank you. It's been lovely to be here with you as well. So thank you
Oh,
for the opportunity and the
oh,
invitation.
of course, of course. And I want to thank everyone who's tuning in into my show, and make sure you're subscribed to my podcast and my YouTube channel in order to get notifications on new videos and content and episodes on Soul to Soul Connections with Jeni Ji, plus everything else. And as a reminder, for those of you who have an inspiring story or something you feel the need to share, let me know. Send me a message, because you never know. I might reach out to you. I might even come to your doorstep and say, let's have that time to talk. I'm listening. So thank you again, Neale. And I will have a chat with you very soon, and God. Namaste.
Thank you, my friend.
Oh,
Bye for now.
thank you. Bye.